Greetings, everyone. This is part 2 of the topic of how townships destroyed African spirituality. It's a conversation that I've been having with Bongi Samsutu and Lerato Omothabi, who are both practitioners and academics within the architecture space. In the previous episode, we explored the historical context of African architecture and how it informed how people structured their lives from a cultural and spiritual perspective. And in this episode, we now delve deep into the origins of township architecture, how it came about, the intentions behind it, and how the world that it created shaped our cultural and spiritual identity. Let's get into it.
What's up?
What I want to know in your views is how did this arrival in these burgeoning cities now affect us as Black people, because we are far removed from anything that we now understand. We are not in our land, we're not in our anything that is familiar to us. Not only is the land not familiar to us in that particular time, what is happening is also not familiar to us. You know, I don't have my wife, I don't have my children, I don't have anything. And now we're building these settlements in these cities. And I feel like we are at a point where now we have lost who we actually are, because who we are is so attached to the environment. Now I'm curious as what does that kind of architecture and what we ended up building or what ended up being built affected our relationship with ourselves, one, and our relationship with spirituality, you know?
Well, I mean, I think we have to go back to I suppose the inspiration behind these houses, these structures. You know, there's an architect that we learn extensively about, a European architect, Le Corbusier, Swiss-French architect who in sort of post-war type of imagining.
Did he write or pioneer Bauhaus?
He didn't really pioneer Bauhaus because that's Walter Gropius, but he's sort of, I think he's also dubbed sort of the father of modernism. He came before the Bauhaus. And so he spoke about this idea of a house being a machine for living, right? Wow. And he was thinking around this idea having mass-produced homes and houses, because after the war, you know, people were coming back.
Which war do you mean? World War II?
World War I.
Okay.
World War I. Because, you know, this started sort of early 20th century.
Okay.
And remember that the Bauhaus is like, what, 1923, I think, to about 1930s. So that's before the war. Before the Second World War. So the Second World War was like 1939 to 1945, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so he says, machine for living, people are coming in, and obviously we have gone past the Second Industrial Revolution, so we're mass producing. So he says, how about we mass produce houses? Because the idea was that the thing and the cultures and the spaces that we need to move away from the cultures and the spaces that produced the war. And we are now reacting to that. And now, because we've gone through the Industrial Revolution, we are now, and there are so many people who are coming back from the war. They are jobless. They can't afford their livelihoods anymore because people are not living in the country, because all of that stuff has probably been blown up, and now people are in the cities.
There's mass production.
And there's mass production.
Timber and in the countryside.
It's steel, it's glass, and it's concrete, right? And people are now moving into the city because of the Industrial Revolution, and people are working in the city because of that. And so now all of these people have to be accommodated for in the city. How do we do that in the most economical way possible, right? And obviously, our Bantu who are coming to work in the city are not also very wealthy people. And so, you know, they'll get by with the bare minimum kind of housing and bare minimum kind of spaces. And also because, you know, we've got steel, we've got glass, we've got concrete. All of this stuff is very easy to manipulate, and we can start sort of prefabricating things. And so building becomes a lot easier, right? So he then says, machine for living, you know, chuck out the frivolousness of things and you've then got architects who are coming from Europe, you know, the UK, who are coming into South Africa as well at that time, who come in and then they influence also obviously white, South African architects of this kind of thinking. Here we're sitting with, how do we deal with the native problem?
The native problem.
But alongside the native problem is also the poor white problem as well. Because now we are moving into industrialization, right? There's mines, there's steel making, and so on and so forth. The whole culture, the agrarian culture, is also sort of somewhat coming to an end, right? Because white people are also moving into the city because this is where they're living, and this is where and they're coming in to work in the city. Somebody has to occupy the management positions on the mines and also within the steel plants. And so most white people then have to let go of the farms. On top of having to let go of the farms, there's also this rinderpest, which also had affected...
Which was a disease for cows, right?
Exactly.
Yes, the plague.
So then a plague that affected the cattle, and so people lost copious amounts of cattle and stock. And so which meant that, I suppose, the most immediate alternative is to come into the city and work. But now the problem is that they don't know much. All they know is the farming, right? They only know agriculture. They're not read. They only learn to read as far as being able to read the Bible, right?
If that,
right? And so they come into the city. They then are slumming it with us because now they don't have money. And they have to come into the city and they're slumming it with us. White people then say, we can't have that. Because whiteness is about purity, it's about virtue, and the idea of racial mixing is going to dilute the whiteness of white people. So we can't have that. So we have to separate them. Right? They can't live together. And also now they're going to start procreating. Now, so we're diluting the blood. So how do we deal with the white problem? Right? Part of dealing with the white problem is then we start creating a welfare state where white people are incredibly prioritized. So they are paid to do certain things. They are given money to go to school. They are prioritized in jobs where they're given management positions. They need to be moved away from Black people as well and housed elsewhere. But now they can't be housed in premium kind of housing. So they also need to be housed in what they termed sub-economic housing, which is also very much similar to the NE51/9.
The house that most of us who grew up in the township grew up in, the one that we called the 4-roomed house, actually has a technical name. It's called the NE51/9. The letters NE stand for non-European and the numbers 51 stand for the year of the design, 1951. And the 9 is basically a designation for one of the different configurations of the housing system. The NE51 housing standards were developed from research conducted by the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR for short, in the 1940s, and it was intended to resolve the question of native housing. The aim of the research was to investigate the minimum building requirements for Black people, with the emphasis being on bare minimum, because the goal was not to provide adequate housing, but the absolute bare minimum, since the aim was not for material comfort of the people, but most importantly, social engineering. The design of the houses were intended to exert greater control of the African family, working conditions, and most importantly, to re-engineer their cultural memory by implanting a spatial order that stripped them of their understanding of themselves and of the world, and simultaneously cementing colonial rule in the psyche. The research that was conducted looked into different aspects of houses, one of them being the psychological effect of the structure on the people living in it. One of the most peculiar exclusions from the housing plans was a bathroom inside the house. This simple exclusion meant that the houses were built to deny Black residents basic human dignity. Because of this exclusion, shame was built into the structure of the house. In many cases, the toilet was built as far away from the house as possible, which made going to the toilet, especially at night, a huge issue. It meant that people resorted to using buckets to relieve themselves, and because the bucket stayed in the bedrooms at night, forcing family to sleep in the stench of their own urine, and in the case of children or the elderly who had to relieve themselves in the bucket, families slept in the stench of their own feces. One of the outcomes of the research was an understanding of how communal Black people were and how large the average family was, yet no provision was made for this communality and the size of the families. Instead, the NE51 housing system offered no communal gathering spaces, since most yards were very small and intentionally restricted the number of people who could live in the houses. You know how in many families in the hood, there are people who end up sleeping on the floor or under the dining room table, or sometimes co-reception, or in the kitchen, as we call it. Well, that wasn't really us being innovative or making do with what we had. If you actually look at the plans of the NE51 houses, they designated the dining room as doubling as a sleeping quarters. It was intentional that sleeping arrangements be difficult and undignified, and to make the family's hierarchical system of respect to elders to be redundant. The NE51 housing had no place for grandmothers, for grandfathers, uncles, aunts, and the bond and the cultural continuity fostered by intergenerational living. Instead, the size of the houses created intergenerational tension. Instead of bonding, we were uncomfortable around each other. Uncles slept next to their nephews on the kitchen floor. Granddaughters slept next to their wheezing grandmothers in one bed. From a town planning perspective, the houses were built significant distance from the economic centers that the Black people were meant to serve. Commuting to and from work then became a part of the tool of keeping adults away from home and their children for as long as possible. For many of us, our parents left home before sunrise and only came back after dark, leaving a generation of Black kids to essentially raise themselves. The premise was that Black people were ultimately workers, tools, cogs, machines, and the houses were essentially storerooms for the machinery.
And so you have some academics who say, when they comb through these kinds of archives, and they'll find that kind of archive where it says sub-economic housing for Europeans, and it looks exactly like the NE51/9, then they'll say, you see, the apartheid government didn't create this kind of housing to house Black people and to oppress Black people. This was actually created for white people. But what they don't take into consideration, or what they don't mention actually, is that they were housed in these houses to take them away from Black people. Because there, the idea of racial mixing was frowned upon. It could not under any circumstances be allowed. Because, and if you understand the absurdity of whiteness, they were willing to go through like all the lengths to not have white people mixed with Black people. And so they had to be housed elsewhere. But obviously now, you know, these guys are coming in and saying, oh, so this is how we were, this is the sort of logic that we followed in housing our people, you know, in the cities, in the European and the UK cities. Perhaps this is what you can use as well. But also in dealing with the native problem, this is how you can house them. But also with these Ziashiana as
They're
well.
not the same.
They're not the same. Because these sub-economic houses had all the amenities inside. Yeah, when we were talking about how, you know, my grandmother's house had two rooms, and it had a lounge and it had a kitchen and it just had a sink and that's it. These houses they had the 2 rooms, they had an entire lounge, and then they had a kitted out kitchen with a whole bathroom inside the house, right? And even the materiality as well was somewhat different. So, you know, with the houses that they built for Abantu Abamnyama, you know, they used common brick, which is like throwaway brick. But what they would do is, I don't know if I'm stepping on some of your questions here, but part of what they would do is that it was all about building at bare minimum. Bare minimum. And so you would have these 2 rooms, the lounge and the kitchen, and then a toilet, a park. So there's no bathrooms in here, right? The kitchen is not kitted out. It's just the lantuga, the sink, and then that's it. There's no ceiling, none of that stuff. So Ziashiana, they were different.
And also because we can't compare the European family to the African family.
Yes.
We spoke about it way earlier.
Yeah.
What is family to us? So that's also the largest discrepancy. A 2-bedroom house will never
fit.
Never, ever be sufficient for any Black family, because how we relate is totally different to how white people relate to each other. We don't have the same attachment to. I don't think they even can, to the capacity that we understand.
Because there's no
Bongisa and I are actually related.
There's no small mother. There's no elder father.
There's
Yes,
no gogo or ukokomkhulu. So in that way, in
yes.
going back to Lendubu Teta about how architecture determines and dictates the way that we function and the way that we move, and the way that we live in the spaces. So now these houses are dictating to us in Dokbana, your family can only be at a certain size, right? Or else, you know, you have, you know, the mother and the father who sleep in the 1 bedroom, and then the kids have to sort of all pile up in either the bedroom, abanye in the living room.
With no gender separation.
And with no gender separation. And abanye are in the living room, and abanye are living in the kitchen, right? Are sleeping in the kitchen. But now, understand that it's very difficult to actually live in these houses, right? So the idea of you being at home the whole day, can you imagine? You're on top of one another. And so people spend then most of their time outside. But the idea was also not to make people that comfortable, because you're temporary citizens.
What do they call it? Temporary sojourners.
Yeah, temporary sojourners.
Yes.
You're you know, you're temporary here. Where you are permanent is what they would call the homelands. That's where, and the homeland is the primitive, again, being stuck in a particular space in time, right? And so that's where you actually belong.
But also that land is also now limited because it's no longer
this
the way this expansive. I can move here. Now it's fixed. It's permanent. Also, it also has a square meter.
Yeah.
Now it's no longer a free meander through the landscape type of adventure, and all of this is studied because what's in South Africa, people like Calderwood, I forget his first name.
Calderwood, yeah.
So people like Calderwood, so he studied at Wits, at Wits, and he does his masters. He starts doing his masters in architecture, but housing specifically, and specifically looking at native housing. So that's the people. He's not the only one, but those are the people that actually go to the extreme measures of studying that from materiality, square meter, how far it is from the city.
Is it that 500-page thing? I think I've been reading that thing.
His dissertation.
Yes.
So there's so much.
Because that's where I learned
database.
about the NE51s and stuff.
So he does. So they establish this. It's a whole research endeavor of what type of brick can we use here that responds climatically like X, Y, and Z. So it needs to be hot in the summer, it needs to be cold in the winter. What type of roof sheets can we use here? Should there be a toilet inside? Shouldn't there be? And they build these experiments, and employees of organizations like the CSIR go and live there because now they need to go report back that, okay, in my winter, 3 months that I lived there, it was X cold. This was the temperature. This was that. And having to go to the toilet outside felt like
so
this.
they experimented first.
Yes. So that's why you have iterations.
That's why you have these iterations.
That's why you have the end heat that has the bathroom but opens with the door that's opening outside. Right. So it's like you're still going outside to go use the ablution, but it's within. And then you have the NE with the toilets. Then you have the row housing NE. You have iterations of the NE because unlike housing white people, where in Pretoria, there's is it Kruger? That brown, Schubert Park, Abu Kruger, where also it's there you'd say it's apartment living, because it's now this tower, and then there are all of these amenities in this tower, all of these services are provided, and here we find ourselves having to not only design the house, but the psychology, the education, the sociology, the politics, all of this thing. It has to be designed for this house and the community around the house. Because it's not just the NE, it's also the township itself. So apartheid spatial planning. So there's the house itself in the square meter, it's X big. These are the amenities we're providing for you. Okay, we land on potentially we're going to mass produce the one with the toilet that's there far away, and this is the yard. They're all more or less the same square meter. Within the neighborhood, we decide that, okay, in this neighborhood we need to bound these people in certain ways. So you'll find that if you look at townships, historically our parents will refer to a specific place as Sebasutwinla. That's where the Zulu people live. So now they realize they can't have us also mix with one another, because when I hear your Xhosa politics and you hear mine, something may come about where we're like, we need to, So now they need to
divide and conquer
boundaries between us as black bodies.
Come Heritage Day, we are all in our regalia and this, I am this, I am that. Was segregating people according to tribe, sorry for using that, to culture, was it necessarily a bad thing? When Verwoerd was talking about it, he says everyone needs to keep their own culture.
But he's
we
only
must
saying
must
that
function
to
within
you,
yes,
to romanticize injustice.
But isn't that what we would have wanted? Wouldn't I have wanted to stay with my people?
But don't forget,
because then you have the problems that we have now, which is that of xenophobia and tribalism.
And don't forget that it's not that before, I know the wars paint us, Abomziligas and all of those wars paint us in a specific way, but we also created relations amongst clans, tribes, so to speak, for lack of a better word. We also, the Zulu nation would come, bazovakasha, bazobona umjaji ukuthi what is, we had relationships. It's not that we hated each other and every time we saw each other, we're throwing stones. No. So my answer is that no, it wasn't because I want to live with my people. Because what happens when the Sotho princess is being sent to KwaZulu to create new relations because they sense we bettered this and this, so you shut up. Those are relationships that we created amongst each other. And don't forget that due to conflict, harsh climatic conditions, we also used to escape certain parts to come live. Because some of us, we're not Tswana because we actually are of Tswana lineage. We're Tswana because we were once Zulu, but something happened with Zulu and we ended up living Tswana, and now 4-5 generations down the line,
it's all mixed.
We are now Tswana, right? Because we ended up there. So
our migratory patterns as well, because like
we cross paths a lot.
We cross paths a lot, and I think I remember my dad telling me how we got our surname Umsotho, in the sense that the fact that we moved from Botswana, what is now known as Botswana, and migrated down and eventually came to settle with amaXhosa, okanye amaThembu rather, amaXhosa because but because our people came speaking Tswana, and Sotho and Tswana,
to them are the same thing.
Yeah, sometimes to them are the same thing, and so ungumSotho, and then that became the
identification,
my forefather's name, Umsotho, and then it then became the name that was Nantuka down. So it's not even so I don't think that he did us a favor by separating us, because you could travel from Gorikai, wherever, perhaps pass through okanye find refuge, in a particular nation, either decide that you're going to stay there, or then become part of that nation, or you move on and then you go and form your city elsewhere. So I think that, of course, they understood that we are obviously stronger together, and so that's part of the reason why, when colonial powers leave in African countries, they sow discord and they sow divisiveness, so that there is a civil war, so that they can fight, so that they can go, they can't. We told you, they are barbaric. They can't get along and they can't rule, because they know in Dokbana, if we actually got along and we actually worked together, we would be absolutely unstoppable. But this idea that no, in fact, there was even discord sowed in and amongst amaXhosa themselves. If you are living in a township namaXhosa, and in amaXhosa nonke elokishini, and remember, Ulantuku Cindy Samangwana was talking about a while back, was talking about how she grew up, and I think she grew up in Langa, if I'm not mistaken. But there were certain areas that were allocated for certain people. So if you were umtu obefundile, like otishara, and a nurse or whatever, you lived in a particular area versus people who were not formally educated. And so ababantu, bebezi class against the people who were not educated.
So I want to go back to the idea of then how are we now navigating these township houses, and how are they affecting our psychology and our understanding of ourselves. And I think when we were talking earlier about how there's a 2-room house, there's a 4-room house, and the mother and the father live here, the fact that the structure doesn't recognize who we are in essence and how we function. I've always had this weird strained relationship with the dining room table at home.
You sleep under it.
No, not even partly. No, that's why I sat to watch TV. You sat under the table,
yes.
Right? And the thing about it, and this is something I thought about as I was doing the research, I'm like, the dining room table is such a foreign thing to us, because what it says is that I must look my father in the eye. Right? And now, because it was only now it clicked to me that we never used the dining room table the way it was intentioned. We never sat looking at each other, right? There was the two end tables were on. This one was against the wall. The other one was against the dining room door. There was one that was used to put like stuff on it, and we never really sat looking at each other. In the entire time we had that thing, we've never as a family sat around looking at each other while eating. We ate during 8 o'clock, whatever it is that we'd be watching at that time, Generations, whatever the stories that we're playing, and all the chairs were turned the other way around, because culturally I'm not supposed to be sitting next to my father and looking at him while he's sitting next to my mother and I'm sitting next to my sister. These things were all segmented. At a certain age, I sit with certain people, I sit with my peers, because that was the time. That was, it was meant to be. So the angular structure of just even the dining room table was causing tension, was causing some kind of interrelational tension within the family, because no one knows what to do. We don't know what to do with ourselves in this table, because we're not supposed to be sitting, and you know how they would be eating in the TV, they're eating with a fork and knife, and then they would always have juice, and then here they have juice there. So you just drink juice all the time. And then how was your day? I don't talk to my father.
Our father has to tell us his business,
like
what he went about
right?
during the day.
And then we have to listen to them talking about their own business together. No, just awkward. So it would end up, a lot of the time you would actually just take your plate and sit outside, especially in summer. You take your plate and you sit outside, or you sit in the kitchen. And for me, that's when I was reflecting on this. I'm like, this is how we have such a conflicted way of being within ourselves, even at home and when we're growing up with the family, because this thing was the structure was forcing us to have a particular relation that I don't want to say we weren't built for, but we weren't cultured for. No,
it was, this whole system was very, very destructive on many levels, and especially psychologically. And it was intentional, although maybe white scholars today may say, but we also lived in the same type of spaces. Or I had a person that likened it to a typical apartment in Rosebank, because it's a 2-bedroom with a kitchen and a bathroom. So the logic is, but it's like an apartment, like a Baldwin, potentially like a Baldwin apartment. And I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. You can't, and you have no idea how Black people are, and the social hierarchy in a Black family. So it's those are the type of things that that contributed in ukwehlisa isithunzi somuzi womuntu omnyama, right? Ukwehlisa isithunzi sikama, ukwehlisa isithunzi sikababa, and isithunzi that you are also establishing in my womanhood. You are
just regular human dignity,
because the way the Webster dictionary would define dignity is un-African. Right. Isithunzi is not that today I'm dressed appropriately according to someone. No. Isithunzi has a lot to do with my inner self. My spirit. So it's those type of things that, like you're saying, having to sit watching your mother is sitting across your father and they're eating dinner, constantly making eye contact. It's bizarre. If you understand, especially if you grew up nabantu abadala, you'll understand. I've never seen my grandparents do that. It is crazy. We made space for my grandfather to eat. It was very separate. I never sat on a couch until I was at least 16, 17. Masbukeli TV. It was a specific time. On the floor. And there was a lot of us in that house. And my grandfather referred to our house, although it was extended now, but the old NE51 was basically where it was his space, because that's how we understood our house. But there are certain things that in Raf, it was only now that I was older that I was able to sit and dialogue with my grandfather, but I wouldn't pull a chair and sit and say Tata and look at him dead in the eye. No, I'd sit respectfully over there and respect his space. So you can imagine how, as a person, the shock, someone once mentioned this last year, imagine the shock of now being given this house. We are you lived in this indigenous, or what was left of the indigenous homestead before, because even before the NE, our architecture did start changing a little bit because we'd start incorporating things like the corrugated iron. Certain materials are starting to come, and the typology of the indigenous homestead also
Was
shifted
changing.
according to that, because you'll find influences of even the Cape Dutch within the indigenous household. Although the layout more or less is the same and this symbolicism is more or less the same, but the materiality advanced according to them. It changed. Let me not say advanced. I take that back. It changed. So now you coming from that, because the system is still the same, right? So the operation of that homestead, although now it looks different, it's still the same. And then you move to Joburg and they give you a 4-room. You've never in your life lived in closed up quarters where if I go, I leave this room, I'm walking into another room. Imagine the shock,
And
the cultural
the yard
shock.
is this narrow,
Square, like
rectangular
thing.
where this is where you have to be.
And
This
the
is your
person
life.
that's living emakaya, because the Makelwan is in close proximity as mhlambe indlu kagogo where you come from. It's close enough. But now access uma khumalo hlala lapha, it's a complete stranger. And you walk outside and it's a long linear road. There are no trees. There's no grass. There's nothing. It's this long row of the same block over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It's just endless.
And it's filled with total
It's-
strangers.
And it's just yes.
And every
Khobana,
house
Moguti,
looks the
you are
same.
Sotho, I'm Sotho, but
The size of the yard is the same.
Same.
So it's pretty much prison-like.
yes.
So this is again going back to this idea of a cell and a machine for living, which is very much that architect that I was telling you about, who is praised throughout all of the architecture schools. And that is not how we live. You know, because how do you then in that kind of setup? You weren't even allowed there, because for you had to go back to emakhaya. I mean, aside from the fact that there wasn't enough space to house everybody there, you weren't allowed to be brewing alcohol in the back because that was illegal. You weren't allowed to be slaughtering because that was also illegal. And so yonke imisebenzi that you had to do had to be emakhaya. So can you imagine every single time you have to go near your
There's a
sebenzi?
milestone.
And there's milestones and there's things that you have to do, because all of that cultural stuff and those traditional stuff is not gone. Those things you still have to do because they are part of your spiritual well-being. So it's a spiritual maintenance of self and spiritual maintenance of this family. So these things constantly need to happen. And so ezizindo must now happen emakhaya every single time. So you constantly are having to travel to, Kodikaikai emakhaya every single time
Or
and then come
eventually you stop going.
back. Or eventually you just stop going.
Which is the case
Which
in my
is what
family.
happens.
People just stop
They
going.
just stop going because it becomes too difficult and it becomes too costly to go up and down, and also you don't have supervision over ezinto zenzekayo, and so you don't know if things are being done the proper way. So you just go, you know what, stuff it, it's fine, sawubona phambili, and you just let go of it completely.
And also, don't forget that we only spent X amount of time within this machine that we lived in.
Yeah.
Because the way the spatial model worked is that I'd have to leave home super early to catch a bus that is costing me potentially what I could save up to go Makaya. 40%. I live 40 kilometers away from the city. Or wherever I'm working, I need 40% of my income to travel to where I'm going to work. And I live in this tight environment. I'm there Monday to Friday. I leave at 4. I come back at 9. Right? Where am I going to find time to reflect and mediate? Where am I even going to find time to dream? If umuntu boniswayo, where do I find time to ngilale ngize ngiphuphe? Because it's also a chaotic environment. Now there's politics that are happening. There's all of this. So the obviously spiritually there's going to be a disconnect, and there's also now Christianity is also at the table now. And am I going to go nyohlaba when the white man taught me that uhlaba is
because that
evil.
wasn't allowed.
It wasn't
Elochi.
allowed, and they told me that that's a ticket to hell.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny you talk about dreaming, because a couple of weeks ago I was having a conversation with one of my uncles, and he was telling me how he caught the 3:45 train from where he lived. Well, rather, they walked and then to the train station, and they had to take this 3:45 train to work, and work was like 2 hours away, right? So it was 3:45 so that they are there at 6 o'clock. And I remember asking him, when do you sleep? If you're at the station at 3:45,
What time does he wake up?
what time did you wake up? He's
Yeah.
like, no, 2 o'clock you are up there, you know. And I'm like, what time do you get home? Like, you get home around 7. And I'm like, so you don't even have time to dream, because your sleep is disturbed. You know, the time when the people are supposed to be talking to you are up already. When 3 o'clock hits, you're up already. You are washing, you're doing this, you know. And his wife, my aunt, then would have to then wake up with him. Obviously, she has to wake up with him
And help
because
him
have to
prepare for the day.
make a fire there. She has to put on the kettle on the stove and make something for him to eat, you know. So their whole sleep is disturbed, and I suppose then it creates the distance with us and our own internal silence that we need in order to connect.
So psychologically, that is obviously damaging, right? And then spiritually, now the missionary came. He taught us that there's this God. When he heard Zulu people say "Ukhulukhulu," "Unkulunkulu," a sky god, and the sky god has said requirements, and the way you guys understand umdali is incorrect. It's null and void, nyahlanya, for lack of a better word. You guys are demonic. You are possessed. You are peasants on a level where we need to save you with immediate effect.
And
you guys,
again, that's primitive.
it is so primitive.
You are not allowed to practice that kind of a belief system here, because here we are modern.
Yes.
Here, you know, you are within modern housing, because this is also like a part of, this is modern architecture,
Yes.
basically.
Isn't it weird how they connected a
Everything is
rectangular house with God?
Yeah.
And then if
Yes.
your house is round, it means you're worshipping the devil.
So
Yep.
it's those things where, in order to access modernity, to
Yeah.
access economical
Development. And you are-
educational development, you
Yeah.
have to subscribe to these things. So now Sunday or Saturday, depending on when Konza Gupi, you're not at home anymore again. You're going to spend X amount of time going to that church, congregating with others. And they've taught us that, it's not all bad. We gave you housing, but if you think it's bad, God will save you. So now we've become these overly religious human beings, even more than them, because now your mind knows when something is wrong, even if you're being told. Your body, you're tired,
body
you're
knows,
exhausted.
yeah.
So now we need a saving grace. So that Sunday o'clock, now wear your Sunday best, go to church. We're again not within the home.
When you look at the plans for the township,
But
all
they
of them-
overpopulate
yes,
the
right?
township with these churches.
This is the thing. So I'm
Yeah.
looking at these.
So you have
the
no
plans.
other choice.
I'm looking at the plans,
Yeah.
like
Yes.
Holland, everything. I'm
They
like, how they built
there is a
the
church
churches.
at every sort of 10K square, at every 10K radius. If you,
and
like
now to us.
in the neighborhood where you are at, there's a church that you can walk to. At every single, almost, like there's churches everywhere. And so it's again that indoctrination through architecture of saying in Dokbana, you are not allowed to practice your Africanness here. This is not a space for you to be African. This is not a space for you to be indigenous. This is not a space for you to be yourself. Again, this is a pass-through space. Awuhlelanga apha. You are very much a temporary resident. But while you are here as a temporary
This
resident,
is how you're going to live.
This is how you are going to live. You are going to live in accordance with our belief systems and our ways of doing things. And part of that is that you are not going to be practicing African spirituality at all. In fact,
And you'll dress a specific way.
and you will dress in a specific
In your Sunday
way.
best. We call it
In
that
your
specific.
Sunday
It was
best.
called
Because
Sunday best
there
is
you
Sunday
are,
best.
there you are in traditional attire. It's going to be a problem. Going to be a problem. And as a remedy, or rather, as a way of making sure that all of that stuff doesn't happen, there's a way that they set out the township to be able to surveil you as well. Because you'll notice in the plans that you probably looked at is that within this sliver, this architectural sliver of yard that each one has, that the actual building itself, the house, is set back on the earth. And that was to make sure that Ikespas can get onto the pavement and come in and sort of like what is the word that I'm looking for?
When they're doing raids and stuff.
Yeah, when they're doing raids and stuff, zingene bulldozing through. So the figure because the Casper's more cool and the roads are quite narrow. The roads, but the pavement,
So you can't escape.
the pavement is like 5 meters. The like you sidewalk and like part of the sidewalk in the pavement is like 5 meters, but the roads are super narrow. They're two-way, but they are super narrow. So in that way, you can't escape, because imagine being
And there's
blocked.
only 2-3 entrances into the
Yeah.
township.
Imagine being blocked by a Casper and you are attempting to drive out or run out, and you're being blocked by a Landuki Casper. It's huge. You can't go anywhere. And so when we say that the absurdity of whiteness and the amount of detail and the research and the iteration that goes into the planning of these houses, where we are incredibly dispossessed and dehumanized, is insane. Because
In its intentionality.
in its
And it's very
intentionality,
intentional,
and
which
the
is
fact
something
that
they forget.
everything is to the T, that to this day we still haven't been able to wrap our heads around how or the extent to which they went to actually dispossess and dehumanize us, even on an architectural level. But you can't, it's so difficult to wrap your head around just how we've been dispossessed on a spatial level.
And I always say that in the works of Abu Calderwoods and all of those people that contribute, the architects of apartheid, they were, I won't call it intentional, but irrational in the sense that they even planned the post. It is not by incident. I don't believe it's by accident that the RTP house is an iteration of the NE51,
And
because
it's
it is
even smaller.
exactly that.
And it's even smaller.
It gets smaller and gets smaller and gets
It's
smaller. Yes, they
smaller,
may add a ceiling
and
and
it's
a little
wor-
bathroom
and
with
the-
a shower, but it's tiny.
It's smaller, the materiality is of a lesser quality as well. And you'll find, like in doing my research, in speaking to Abantu Elokshini, where I worked in Bupilong, is they actually prefer the native housing scheme over the RTP housing
Because they're better built.
because it's better built.
It has longevity.
And it that thing stands.
No cracks.
No cracks whatsoever. And one of the things that they also did is, Yabana, when for some of the houses, the exterior wall is a cavity wall, right? Which is 110, 110, and then in the center there's a 50 millimeter gap. And so what they did is they poured concrete down that 50 millimeter gap. So that house stood. That house stood. I remember the one time they were a bit Deliza, one of the houses, while I was there doing research, they had to bring in a wrecking ball with the entire crane about Deliza Lendlu, because just merely they Deliza with,
With hammers.
with hammers and those kinds of tools, it wasn't enough. They had to bring in a wrecking ball to like flatten that thing, because it was insane. But also in the makeup of the concrete itself, the aggregate that was added to make the concrete so strong was more than what they do now. Because when you're mixing concrete, it's the cement powder and the
My
aggregate.
grandmother's house. My grandmother, they were the first people to move into that house when it was being built. There's nothing wrong with that house.
Yeah.
It's still the same doors that they put in. There's not a single crack. There's nothing that of any kind of, maybe except for the roof. at
Yes,
that.
well, yeah, because I mean the roof sheeting at some point had to go,
Yeah.
and also there was asbestos in the
Yeah.
mix, so that all that stuff had to go. So I mean, in also speaking to that, there were no ceilings, right? You just had roof sheeting. that within itself speaks to what Leonardo was referring to earlier about human dignity. Because part of human dignity is privacy as well. And the moment you don't have privacy, you feel like you are stripped of your human dignity. And so if people are able to hear absolutely everything that's happening in the house, there's no privacy. And so ceiling, which means that there's no insulation. So all the surfaces are hard surfaces. So sound is reflecting and sound is bouncing off. So obviously, Lulape next door in those row houses is going to hear absolutely everything that's going on in the house because of these hard surfaces.
You know, the indignity of watching TV and you can't hear anything.
And you can't because
it's raining.
It's raining.
Guys, when it rains, you just sit there. Like you have to go sleep when it starts raining because there's nothing to do.
Can you imagine if it's now hailing? It's hail. Your fear is, oh my gosh, is this roof going to be able to?
You go deaf, man. Like when it's hailing,
is this roof going to be able to stand the rain? And so that was one of the things that the residents of Bupulong were complaining about in saying that they actually prefer these native housing to RDP. On the one hand, you could look at it as being I suppose the skill of building or the materiality back then lasted longer and so on and so forth. And now, skill is not as great as it was back in the day. And also because of those copious amounts of iterations and experimentations, they had the time to perfect these structures and these construction methods, right? Because obviously they knew in Dokbana, the more aggregate they added in the concrete, the stronger it'll become, the more it'll stand, and I mean for the longer it'll stand. And so they had all of that time to experiment. On the other hand, you could also look at it as constraining people within dehumanization and within these dehumanized spaces, because also you weren't allowed to add onto your house.
You couldn't.
You couldn't
The way
extend.
The way the square meter of the
there
yard
wasn't
is
enough
set up,
space.
there isn't enough space.
But you were also not allowed
to extend.
Because remember, you're not a permanent resident here.
You're renting.
You are renting.
Yes.
It's not your house.
It's not
That's
your
why
house.
grandparents today, but rent.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not your
When they
house.
pay
You are a
services.
temporary citizen here. Ikaya lako, where you are a permanent person, is in the primitive homeland, in the primitive homestead where you belong. Here is modernity. Here.
You know what that explains to me? The fact that Kokasi, there's nothing sacred. There's nothing sacred.
Yeah, the sacred was designed by whiteness, which is their churches. That's the closest you'll get. We will define how and what you perceive as sacred.
Yeah.
Because now
because you're living in our space.
Yes.
And you're living in a space that we create for you. And because of that, you have to
narrative.
live. Yeah, we control the narrative, and you have to live on our terms.
So now when Abokoko say Lungin Sumsam, I'm like, what is that? What are you talking
You
about?
can't do things like that.
I don't even it's embarrassing how old I was when I heard the term Umsamo. Like very recently in my life, like, what is that? I mean, Umsamo is like the pillow thing. What do you know what I mean? And the fact that when we were growing up, we knew that there's nothing spiritually important in any. The only thing that was sacred was the porcelain doll in my
the dog.
the dog.
Oh,
You know what I mean? There was like
room divider.
yes, there was sentimentality and the plates that sat above, the cupboard. You know what I mean? And so and they were important in essentially their sentimentality, but for us, we are unable to relate spiritually to our environment because there's nothing sacred about it.
And then when you go back to, because it wasn't just the NE51 that was the housing model. Now, you mentioned it earlier, although we didn't discuss it. The hostel model, which is specifically now, it's a housing model specifically designed for men at the time, right? So these men are going to come to Joburg and mine coal or diamonds or whatever. So they start designing these models in... Another person, again, could say it looks like apartment living, but it is not. Because now this space is designed in a way where amenities are located in a specific place. It's a place to sleep. And if you watched you understand that it
And
was.
I learned so much. So if in fact
Yes.
doing the research, I learned so much about Mzindwezi. I didn't know like the
Yeah.
policemen had a particular thing. They were called
Yeah.
blackjacks, and that's why he was coming every night. He came at night.
Yeah.
Because they like raiding at night. This is why this
Yes.
guy is always coming at
So
night.
it's there's a rhetoric in the story itself, but it speaks to an actual
Yes.
there's an actual historical reference in that the way he'd show up, and then it's a place where you sleep. Occasionally your wife will come, but because most Waynes is what they don't have permanent residence in this place. But we, in the same breath, although it's not really spoken about, we encourage you to go explore debauchery and do other things. So almost the hostel is set up in a way that if you look at the social structure, it is disruptive in that we are taking the men away from the household. So we are destroying the household. And then when we get them here in the urban area, we make them live amongst men. Then we start bringing in mischievous behavior. So we start bringing in sex workers. Sex workers work, by the way, guys. So we start bringing in sex workers. So those women will satisfy whatever sexual desire.
Which goes with
emotional-
alcohol, right?
Yes, I'm getting to. So it they will satisfy, and now because these sex workers are more permanent-ish residents, so now you obviously in time forget about your wife and the responsibility of sending money home. Then we have the problem where now today lots of households are women-led households because in the hostels it wasn't encouraged for men to be responsible, right? So and then now they're starting to create new emotional attachments to the city woman, right? And then there's a specific hostel, I think in Witbank, that was also an experiment where it was the quarters, the sleeping quarters and the ablutions and amenities, but at the entrance of the quarters there was a shebeen. So it is specifically placed. I think you also see it in old hostels in Tembisa where you'll find that alcohol is generally at the threshold. So you start there. So it's fortnight. I got my 4 shillings or whatever I earn, and I walk into the yard, and the first thing I see is, unlike maybe a church for other people, it's this shebeen. The music is loud. It's popping. Where am I going to spend my 4 shillings? There. Now I have nothing to send back home. Again, we are dismantling the household because Ubaba is no longer responsible.
And once
these men are so exhausted, because you have to empathize with them. These men are so exhausted because of the things they're seeing in those mines. People are dying left and right. The working environment is toxic. Umlungu hleli la. So you
And
need
you can
an
die at
outlet.
any point.
And your wife is not here. The person you'd speak to, the person maybe you'd go on sango masikola. A person you'd go dialogue with, Uguti, this is my frustrations in life. You are obviously going to attach, and now these people are shoving this narrative, this alcohol brewing system down your throat. You are obviously going to start picking up these bad habits. And that again was planned. It's not that it happened by chance or mistake. There's a reason why if you drive into certain townships to date, you find abandoned breweries in
At the entrance.
At the entrance. I think
beer
Atchurchville
halls,
also
yes.
has one where you'll find beer halls at the entrance of these townships. There's a reason why these old beer breweries are part of the industrial neighborhood. In Springs, there's one that is located around it's situated around an industrial area. It's because what they are trying to do is that they're trying to control, one, how you feel about self in where you live, and how you feel at work, and what you're going to use to relax or unnerve yourself. And for them, it's that, okay, maybe if we fail to get them religiously, we'll also get them by the things izinto zomhlaba ezithandekayo. So we're going to make them drink to no point of return. And the black woman is more likely to be overly religious. But how do we get to the black man? We are going to get to them by ukubapha izinto that are enjoyable, right? So alcohol and the city woman. And all of that is very, very intentional in that it removes, you'll never go back home. And you'll die here also, and your remains will never be taken home. So you'll lahleka even the connection and ancestrally. You remember when Abokoko at the workshop spoke about crown mines and all of how people lived in those type of situations, that you everything you're doing, everything, the mine is here, you live here, your whole life is around here. You start a new life, you start a new family here. And if Sing Kanegabusha in this urban settlement, Signo Mamamusha, I have a new family, I have new children here, what are the odds that I'm going to send even a half a shilling to rural KZN
and
for
you know
that household?
And you know the tragedy with those families that are now created in the urban areas is that it's a family built out of survival.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, the woman can't survive on her own because she can't get employed anywhere. It's illegal for black women to be employed in about 90% of the industry. So she needs someone in. And the other thing was, I remember in Orlando when they were starting to build it, you couldn't buy a house unless you were married.
Yes, I was about to say.
You had to be married.
You had to be married
yes.
as a woman.
So now you are just trying to survive. You know, and I think we don't realize it, but this is why we've never known love in most of our black families, because our parents and their parents at the time, they were just surviving. These people were not together because they loved each other. Maybe at some point, you know, they were friendly, they were familiar, you know, but they were like, hey dude, I can't do this on my own. I can't do this on my own. Can we just do this thing so that we can just survive, you know? And it further then creates this tension of, you know, the black family or the black home not being a happy space, which was because I have no memory of my parents being happy in my entire childhood. I could realize at best they respected each other, at best they tolerated each other, you know, they could have a cordial conversation at best, but we all knew that these people don't really care about each other, you know?
Yeah, it's holding on to one another. You have to find somebody to hold on to,
of sorts.
to hold on to, because it's the situation is dire, you know. I mean, we're all being everywhere you look, you're being dehumanized, you know, at every single point. So where can you actually be a human being, and with who, right? And so you have to hold on to omnia umdu that you can be human with, and you know, you're both being dehumanized in your own corners at work, and then you have to sort of come together here and figure it out and work it out. And so, you know, men are being infantilized in these jobs, and also a hostel as well. I mean, the setup of a hostel in itself is infantilizing, and also strips men of their human dignity as well. So you are no longer the head of the household like you were back home. Ngoku nileli kwibhanka ingani ngabantwana besikolo, you know,
and you're sleeping next to teenagers
and you're sleeping next to teenagers at that, and you have to share this space with teenagers, right? Whereas lendawo nisuka kuyo, you know, you had indawo where otata sat, and then, you know, teenage boys sat, and you were separate. But ngoku you are all together, and you have to live here.
And so you're the same.
You are
peers now.
You are peers now. So again, how space and the modeling of space has stripped us of our dignities, and infantilizing amadoda. The same, I suppose, goes for women as well. This idea that you're unable to get indlu without a man, right? That you have to be married to get indlu, and it can't be a thing where, and I think some of them used to get away with being able to have it under their son or things like that. But for the most part, it was women who had to, as a woman, if you needed a house, you had to be married first. So there was this thing where as a woman, you had to be attached to a man, and that goes back to, again, the patriarchal, you know, the Western, the what am I trying to say? Modern colonial idea of patriarchy, in that, and the family as well, in that the house, every family needs to be a nuclear family. There must be a mother, there must be a father, and there must be children in the mix. And so we are encouraging that, and in fact we are forcing it by, if a woman wants a house, she must be married. She must be. We know for sure abantwana, but she must be married
And married
to a man
according to
according to
Christianity.
Christianity.
So no stembu, what?
No temple, none of that.
Akho nyongo.
No,
Hey,
none of that.
none of
And
that.
in this house, you are not allowed to be living with your extended family here. You can, it's the nuclear family or nothing else.
What do they call that document?
Or they call, what was that document, Ganen? There's a document that they had where
With
they
everyone's
listed
names.
everybody who stayed in the house. Right? Oh, goodness. You know, it's part of my thesis. I had that everybody is listed in this house. It's the person, the father, the mother, and all the children are listed here. Their names and their ID numbers. All of them are listed here. And you cross that. Permit, yeah. You cross that person's name off and it's written deceased, and an official of the Native Administration needs to sign next to that. Same. But xa kusizwa kuzoraidwa kuzochekishwa, if the people who are in this house are not the ones, and sijonga ipasi yakho, are not, you've got extra people in this house and those people don't have permission to be here, because also they get given permission maybe for a couple of days to be here
for underemployment.
Or they're visiting. And if they have lived beyond ilantuka yabo, they get thrown in jail and they have to leave. But in this house, you are only allowed your nuclear family, and that's that. So there is no space for bloodkins. There is no space for umagazi, utabawo, or umakhulu, or anything like
And
that.
there's no indlu kagogo.
They either have to go and get their own space, in which case they also have to be married, for them to be able to get those spaces, or
Back to the home.
back to emakhaya.
Yeah, I guess.
Let me share up, okay? You know, when you're going to the internet or when you're watching TV and you see one of those really, really amazingly beautiful houses with like the amazing architecture, the ones with like the floor to ceiling windows that just drench the whole space in warm sunlight. There's a couch in the corner that looks like it could swallow you whole in a giant hug. And just seeing that house evokes a certain kind of feeling, a feeling of contentment, safety even. You feel as if sitting on that couch would be a sign of you having arrived in life. What's interesting is that those feelings are not something that happen by chance. That sense of contentment, that sense of safety and achievement are built into the very blueprint of the home. Those houses that we see are designed to make you feel good. The ratio of the windows, the placement of the couch, the direction of the entire house was meticulously planned to evoke in you a feeling that you are a person deserving of the very best in life. The design of the houses that we grew up in, the ratio of the windows, how little they were and how little light they provided, the odd tension between grown-ups and kids, and the cramped spaces deliberately made knowingly that they won't accommodate the average family. All those decisions were made intentionally to evoke a certain feeling in the inhabitants of that house, a feeling that they are not deserving of light, that they are not deserving of personal space, that in this life, they are not really worth anything. One way you can deprive a person of their sense of self-worth is to strip away their values. As human beings, we are inherently bound to systems of value. At the core of the value systems is a belief in something bigger than ourselves, that we are here as a result of something bigger than us, a higher power maybe. A higher power that not only can I relate to, but one that I can structure my whole life around. The township houses that we grew up in were designed to strip away from us any resemblance that we have of the God that we believe in. Every measurement, every placement was designed to inculcate in us that notion that we are not of God. It's not just about the size of the houses. I mean, traditional Japanese houses are extremely small. The people in those houses sit on the floor and don't wear shoes, yet those architectural elements were not meant to strip away people's culture, but actually to celebrate it. Township houses were designed to make Black life feel unbearable. They were situated in distances that would leave us perpetually exhausted with no energy to even think about divine concepts, maybe only on Sundays. In a traditional homestead, on the other hand, there are multiple structures that accommodate different aspects of human life. For example, when a pregnant woman gives birth, there is a house within the home that is converted into a delivery room, a nursery. In that room, the mother and the newborn are attended to by a whole team of elder mothers, and in isiXhosa, that house is called ifu. In a traditional homestead, a wife has her own house. The grandmother has her own house. Teenage boys and teenage girls of the family have their own respective spaces. In a traditional homestead, there is a space for the family to gather, a space that fits the whole family, no matter who they are, no matter how many of them there are. In a traditional homestead, there is a house designated as a place where the gods reside, a sacred space where the most important ceremonies are conducted. In a traditional homestead, there is a place for God and the divine. In many traditional homesteads, the most valuable asset of the family, their cows, live at the center of the home. The wealth of the family resides at the very heart of the home, protected by everyone. In a township house, there is nothing sacred in our homes. There is nothing sacred about our homes. Nothing in our home says you are part of something bigger than you and you should feel proud of it. Instead, we live in shame. Shame embedded into every brick, mixed into the fiber of the cement of the foundation. But despite all of that, I am a child of the township. This is where I was born and raised and nurtured. This is where my most beautiful childhood memories were made. This is where I learned to love and to hurt and to heal. My memories of family gatherings and cousins and comedy shows on TV, hanging out with my friends, the game festivals during school holidays. The way we hurried through our chores and bolted into the streets only to come back home starving, filthy and happy. Despite all the intentions behind the township and its ghastly architecture, the one thing that has always been beautiful about it is us. The houses were meant to break us, but our mothers kept them immaculately clean and complete with sacred porcelain puppies shining on mahogany dining room tables that we never dared touch unless we were cleaning them, of course. It was the sound of tamiya and the smell of cobra polish that made us feel like this is home. Coal stoves and scones hot out of the oven and laid out on newspapers to cool off on the floor. Uncles who did the garden in their overalls and formal shoes, and aunts with fleshy arms who could feed the whole neighborhood with a couple of chickens and a sack of mabele. The neighbors are fighting again. Speakers on blast, Bob Marley and the Wailers on the left, ZCC and IPCC on the right, and the back opposite neighbor is rebuilding their shack. The knocking is going to last the whole weekend. At night, you hear music from a nearby tavern, the melodies carrying with them distant gunshots. I have been living in the suburbs for many years now. It is quiet here, isn't it? My mother once asked when she was visiting. It is. It's quiet here. I want to leave you with a question that I would like us to engage on. Considering what we have learned about the effects of the township architecture on the psyche of Black people, I want to ask you something. What kind of spirituality does the architecture of the township give birth to? What kind of spirituality does it form when we live in a system that is meant to break us? What kind of spirituality does that environment give birth to? In many ways, this question could be an entire episode alone, but I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Hit me up in the comments or in the DMs. Now maybe we should do a live discussion about it. Let me know what you think. Oh, by the way, if you do not know yet, The Journey Kwantu has a book. It has officially been launched and it's doing very well. You can find it at most reputable bookstores and you can also find it online. I would appreciate it if you got yourself a copy. There are some chapters that you would be familiar with and there are many more that you're not. It is a very personal project to me where I divulge a lot more personal information and my own personal journey through spirituality. So I would appreciate it if you got yourself a copy. Till then, my name is Wasumzin.
My name is Novula Zulu, Imbali Yasembali, and this is my journey, Kwantu.
My name is Matthew Sifusuzwane from Alexander Township and also David Todd. And this is my journey, Kwantu.
My name is Tikiso from Sishanguve, and this is my journey, Kwantu.
My name is Dumisulo from Waterville Port Zone, and this is my journey, Kwantu.
Thank you for joining me on yet another episode of The Journey Kwantu. I wish you light, I wish you courage, and I wish you all the very best on your journey. Makwande.